Masechet Zevaḥim, Daf Peh Daled, New Mishnah, Elu im alu lo yeredu. This is a list of items that, although they are invalid and you should not put them on the Mizbeach lecha techila, if they were already placed on the Mizbeach, then you leave them there, you do not bring them down. We're going to see a list of other things that are worse that you do, even if they put them up, they are brought down. So this is a list of things that are fit. They're kosher in some sense. Not good enough that they should be up. They're really invalid, but they're not as so bad. So you can leave them up if they're already there. Halan v'hayoseh v'hatameh v'shenishchat chutz lizmano v'chutz limkomo v'shekibelu pesulim v'zarku et damo. If you have blood or meat, sacrificial portions that were left overnight, if you did shechita on a korban during the day, then you can put these things on the mizbech during the day and during the night. But if it's left over to the following day, then it's invalid. So don't put them up. But if you put them up, then it's okay. Leave it there. Also, something that leaves the temple courtyard. You're not allowed to bring the sacrificial meat outside the courtyard. And if you do, it's invalid. But again, you don't have to take it down. If the meat becomes tameh, also, you do not take it down. If it was slaughtered, having intention that it will be consumed outside the time or outside the place. Outside the time would be pigul. Outside the place would be invalid. Nevertheless, it stays on the mizbech once it's there. And if someone pasul either received the blood or sprinkled the blood, we'll see what kind of pasul it is. Like, for example, if the kohen is tameh who does it, then it's invalid, but it stays up. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, shenishchat balayla, v'shenishpach dama, v'yasa dama chusa kila'im im alta tered. Now, according to Rabbi Yehuda, the following these three things are in the worst category. If shechita is done at night, all shechita has to be done during the day. If it's done at night, not only is it invalid, but even if it goes up b'di'avad, you take it down. And if the blood was not received in a vessel, but went onto the floor directly from the animal onto the floor, and never received in a vessel, then it's totally invalid. And if the blood went outside the curtains, that would be in the Mishkan, the curtains, or in the Bet HaMikdash, if the blood went outside the courtyard, then these things are so bad that even if you put them up, they do come down, according to Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Shimon Omer, lo tered shehaya pesulo bakodesh. Rabbi Shimon Omer, kol shepesulo bakodesh, hakodesh mekabelo. Lo haya pesulo bakodesh, en hakodesh mekabelo. Rabbi Shimon is more lenient, and he says even these three things that Rabbi Yehuda mentioned, if they go up, then they do not come down. Why? Because it became disqualified in the sanctuary. Because Rabbi Shimon said, anytime the disqualification happens in the sanctuary will receive it and make it acceptable if it's placed on the Mizbeach. But if it's something that was disqualified not in the sanctuary area, the area of the Kodesh, then the Kodesh, meaning the Mizbeach, will not receive it. Okay, so all the things that we said above are things that are acceptable because they are in the sanctuary, according to Rabbi Shimon, including these three. But now here's a list of not. The following, their invalidation is not in the sanctuary, not in the place of sanctity, and therefore Rabbi Shimon and everybody would agree that these things are in the worst category. If they go up, you bring them down. Harobeya v'hanirba, an animal that was involved in bestiality. That didn't happen in the sanctuary. That happened somewhere on someone's farm. Some sin happened like this. That animal is you cannot use as a korban. If there are witnesses, 2 witnesses, then it would be stoned. But if there's only 1 witness, then you can't stone the animal, but it becomes disqualified as a korban. An animal set aside for idolatry, or that actually was worshipped in idolatry. And an animal that was used in payment of a zonah, or for the price of to buy or exchange for the price of a dog. An animal that was born from kilayim, or involved in the sin of plowing with 2 different species together. And terefa, the animal is sick and will not live out a year. it cannot be used as a korban. And all these things happen not in the sanctuary. It's already became terefa. However, it became taref. Something has got an injury or whatever it was. Hayoseh dofen ba'ale mumin. An animal that's born of a cesarean section. That didn't happen in the sanctuary. That's from the time it was born. It cannot be used as a korban. And if it has a mum, also it cannot be used. Rabbi Akiva machshir be'ba'ale mumin. Rabbi Akiva disagrees with the Baal mum. We're going to Gemara tomorrow. We'll say it's only a certain minor type of mum. Then, according to Rabbi Akiva, then that's okay. Not that you can use it lechatechila, but bediavad, if it's placed up there, then you leave it up there, according to Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Chanina Sigan HaKohanim Omer, Doche Haya Rabba et Baaleh Mumin, Me'al Gabeh HaMizbeach. Rabbi Chanina, the deputy of the Kohanim, said that his father used to reject any animal that has a mum upon the Mizbeach, and so he seems to disagree with Rabbi Akiva and saying it's totally not good, and if it has a blemish, then you bring it down. Keshem sheim alu lo yerdu, kach im yardu lo ya'alu. Concerning the first group of animals that are not so bad, just like we said that lechatechila should not put them up, but if you do put them up b'diavad, you don't bring it or take it off. So too, if it was taken off, you don't put it back on. So it was on there. You're supposed to leave it there. Now somehow it popped off or was taken off by mistake, then you don't put it back on because it really didn't belong there in the first place. Any animal that is placed on the mizbeach while alive, you bring it down. You never sacrifice a live animal, burn a live animal. If you have a korban that went up the mizbeach while it was alive, bring it back down. But if they did shechita already on top of the mizbech, you're supposed to do shechita on the northern section, on the ground in the courtyard on the north. If you did shechita of a korban olah on top of the mizbech itself, well then you do the processing of it also up there. You yafshit, you skin it and take the skin off, and that goes to the kohanim, and you cut it into pieces. The innards, the intestines, you're going to bring down and clean them because you have to clean them before burning them, and you butcher it up on top of the mizbeach, and then you put those limbs directly onto the mizbeach. Gemara teaches Tanya, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Zot Hi ha-ola, hare elu shelosha mi'utin, perat le-she-nishchata balayla, ve-she-nishpach dama, ve-she-yasa dama chutz la-kila'im, shim alta, tered. We're going to bring a source for the Yehuda. He said that there are 3 items that, according to the Yehuda, even if they go up, you have to bring them down. So what's his derivation? It's from the pasuk that says, Zo Torah ta'olah, hi ha'olah. So we're going to learn that in general, Torah ta'olah, hi ha'olah, that there is a rule, a general rule, Torah, for that which goes up on the mizbeach, that you leave it there. So we learn from this pasuk that in general, even things that are invalid, it's somewhat invalid. If you put it up there, then you leave it there. However, this pasuk has 3 limitations. Zot is a limiting word, this and only this. He, this and only this. Ha, the olah, but means a particular one and not something else. And so therefore there are 3 limiting words, and therefore we can limit 3 different cases. Number 1, if the slaughtering was done at night, totally no good, bring it down. If the blood was poured on the floor directly from the animal and not caught in a vessel at all, that's number 2, you bring it down. And if the blood was taken outside of the temple courtyard, even if it goes up, you bring them down. That's Rabbi Yehuda's source. Rabbi Shimon Omer Ola, En li ela ola keshera, minayin l'rabot shenishchata balayla, v'shenishpach dama, v'sheyasa dama chutz la-kila'im, v'halan, v'hayoseh, v'hatameh, v'shenishchat chutz lizmano, v'chutz l'mkomo, v'shekibelu pesulim b'zaraku et damo, hanitanin lemata shenatanan lema'ala, ulman la shenatanan lemata, v'hanitachin b'chutz shenatanan b'fnim, b'fnim shenatanan b'chutz, upesach v'chata sheshechatan shelo lishman minayin, Talmud Omar, Torah ta'ola, riba Torah achat, l'chol ha'olin, shim alu lo yerdu. Rabbi Shimon says, I have the word ola. It says, Zot Torah ta'ola, hi ha'ola al mokeda. So now we know that a korban ola is supposed to go up and be burnt on the mizbech. If I just had that word ola, then I would say, okay, if it's a valid ola, valid other korbanot also, then it goes up on the mizbech and you leave it there. But what about these other things? And then it gets a whole long list. We'll go through the list again in just a second. But how do you know that these things also, if you put them up, they stay there? Because it says Torah ta'ola, the law for everything that goes up. So these are extra words that comes to say everything, and that comes to include in what stays up all these things, kol ha'olin, that if they already went up, then you leave them there. Okay, we're going to limit it to some other cases, but first we're going to include all these cases. Which cases does Rabbi Shimon include that if they went up, then you leave it on there? That's something that did slaughter at night, or the blood spilled directly onto the floor without a vessel, or the blood was taken outside the kilaim. Those are the three that Rabbi Yehuda disagrees on. Rabbi Yehuda is machmir on them. Rabbi Shimon includes them in the leniency. And also, if it's left overnight, or taken out of the courtyard, the meat is taken out of the courtyard, or if it becomes tameh, or it was slaughtered with intention to consume it outside the time or outside the place, or if someone pasul received the blood or sprinkled the blood, or if the blood is supposed to be put below the red line and instead was sprinkled above the red line, or was supposed to be above the red line and instead was sprinkled below the red line, or if it was supposed to be sprinkled on the outside mizbech and it was placed in the inside mizbech, or it was supposed to be sprinkled on the inside mizbech and it was placed on the outside mizbech. All these korbanot are pasul. They're not good. And lechatechila, you should throw them out, burn them, but outside. But if you put them on the mizbech, b'diavad it's okay. Or on Pesach and korban hatat, if you have in mind for another korban. This is all the way back at the beginning of the Masechet. Pesach and Chatat, you have in mind that's going to be a Shelamim or an Olah, then it's invalid. And yet, even though it's invalid, if you put it on the Mizbech, it stays there. So how do you know that in all these cases, you leave it on the Mizbech? Because it says Torah Ta'olah. The Torah is giving an one inclusion for everything that if it go, all these cases, that if they go up, they do not come down. Now, once you're including this, maybe you should include every case of something invalid. יכול שאני מרבה הרובע, והנרבה, והמוקצה, והנעבד, ואתנן, ומחיר, וכליים, מוטרפה, ויוצא דופן, תלמוד לומר, זאת. So Rabbi Shimon also says, there is a limiting word. The word zot is a limiting word, and that's going to exclude an animal that was involved in bestiality, or if it was set aside for idolatry, or was worshipped as idolatry, or given as a price of a zonah, or for a dog, or it was from mixed breeding, or if it's a terefa, or if it was born of a C-section, those zot. No, those do not go up to the mizbech, and if they're up, you bring it down. Now, how come Rabbi Shimon includes some things and excludes other things? I know we have an inclusionary word, zot, torata is inclusionary, zot is exclusionary. So how do you decide what to include and leave on the mizbeach and what to exclude that you take down from the mizbeach? אחר שריבה כתוב ומיעט, מרבה אני את אלו שהיה פסולן בקודש, ומוסיע אני את אלו שלא היה פסולן בקודש. Since you have an inclusion word and also a limitation, it makes sense to include those things where it became disqualified in the Kodesh itself. That is not so bad. It's bad, it's invalid, but at least it was in the sanctuary, on holy premises, that it got disqualified, so that makes it not as bad. And I'm going to exclude from this law things that are disqualified not in the state of sanctity, not even in the sanctuary. That's all Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Yehuda, Maitila mehacha, mipnei ma amru lan bedam kasher, shahare lan kasher be'emurin, lan be'emurin kasher, shahare lan kasher babasar. Now, Rabbi Yehuda, he had three exclusionary words. Okay, fine. Zot and he and ha. Those excluded those three cases. Okay, fine. But now, where is Rabbi Yehuda going to learn that we should include all the cases that Rabbi Yehuda does include, all those, the list all the way at the beginning, Rabbi Yehuda agrees in all those things that if they go up, they remain on it. So where does he learn it from? He learns it from the following. Why do we say that lan bedam kasher, if you left it overnight, then it's kasher. When we say kasher here, it doesn't mean it's totally good. It's lan, it left overnight. So lechatechila shouldn't put it up. Kasher means bedi avad is kasher. If it was put up, then you don't have to take it down. So how can we say that if it was left overnight, then it's kasher? Because lan kasher be'emurin. Because the sacrificial parts, if you leave them overnight, also those are kasher. Again, this means that b'di'avad, if you leave it up, you can take it down. Now, so that's true for the blood. We know the blood is okay because the sacrificial innards are okay. Now, the sacrificial innards, how do we know that those are kasher and you can leave it on the mizbeach if it's put there? Because lan kasher babasa, because of the meat. We're talking about the meat of a shelamim that is totally good lechatechila on the second day. Shelamim, you have 3 days to eat it. So the meat that's edible to the people is okay the first day, the first night, and the second day. Since the meat is perfectly 100% kosher, valid to eat on the second day, therefore there's some sense in which the innards and the blood are also okay. They're not actually okay, but since they're part of the animal, and so it's just, this is the valid part of the animal that can be eaten on the second day, and here's the part that's sacrificial parts that should have been on the first day, but because some of the meat is okay on the second day, so this bidi avad, if it goes up on the mizbeach, that's okay. That's true for the emurin and also for the blood. Yoseh sheyoseh kasher b'mama. Now, if you have meat that leaves the temple courtyard, that also, bidi avad, it's okay. Why? Because there is a situation where meat can be outside the sanctuary. That's in the time of Bamot, when private altars were allowed. By definition, they were not in the main sanctuary, not in the Mishkan. They were in people's backyards, and that was okay. Since there is a situation where it's okay, then even here, although here it's prohibited and invalid, but b'di'avad, you leave it there. Tameh, ho'il v'utar la'abod, la'abodat tzibur. Tameh, there are some situations where a communal offering that's tameh can be offered. It's not usual. Usually it's invalid, and here it'll be invalid, but since there is a situation, therefore, b'di'avad, it's okay. Chutz lizmano ho'il u'meraseh le'pigulo. If you have in mind that you're going to consume it outside of the time, that is acceptable in the sense that it's acceptable to make it pigul. We learned that in order for something to become pigul and hayav karet, you have to do everything else correctly. So there's actually procedures. You have to check off all the boxes to make it valid to be pigul. And so in that sense, it is acceptable to be pigul. So it's acceptable in some sense, although invalid, b'di'avad, you can leave it there. Having intention outside of the place, there's a hekesh in the pasuk. It's in the same pasuk, Bayom HaShilishi and Pigul, that outside of the time and outside of the place have the same law, and therefore outside of the place also is in some sense valid. Shekibelu pesulim vezariku et damo b'anach pesule dehazu la'avodat tzibur. If a kohen who is pasul accepts the blood or sprinkles the blood, well, a kohen who is tameh is pasul, but there are situations when everybody is tameh, then even tameh kohanim can do communal offerings. So since there is a situation which is okay, therefore, even when you're not in that situation and it's invalid, but b'di'avad, you can leave it up there. Now we ask, with all these derivations, does that make sense to derive something that's in an invalid situation from a case where it was a valid situation? No, it's in Bamot. Yeah, during the time of Bamot it was okay, but now we're not in the time of Bamot, so how could you say it's okay? Or the meat of a shelamim offering, yes, you can eat on the next day, but that's not true for the emurin and the dam. So how are you deriving something that is prohibited and invalid from something that is perfectly kosher and valid? What kind of derivation is that? And the answer is Tana zot Torah ta'ola riba samich le. Actually, Rabbi Yehuda, his real derivation is from the pasuk zot Torah ta'ola as an inclusionary word, just like Rabbi Shimon learned zot Torah ta'ola. Rabbi Yehuda also agrees that not the word zot, but Torah ta'ola, that's an inclusionary one law for all of these things that go up. Since that's inclusionary, now the question is, all right, we know a lot of things have to be included under Torah ta'ola, but which items specifically? In order to define which items specifically should be in, Rabbi Yehuda was not going to use the rule that anything that is invalidated in the sanctuary, that was Rabbi Shimon's criteria. Rabbi Yehuda does not agree with that criteria. So how does he decide which items should be included in this leniency? That's why he made these parallels. If it's okay in some scenario, then it's good enough that if you put it up, then it doesn't come down. So we're not actually learning it from an invalid situation to from a valid situation to an invalid situation. This is not the primary definition. The primary definition is Zot Torah ta'ola. But once we know that Torah ta'ola has to include some things, then we simply use those comparisons to decide what should be included in Torah ta'ola and be lenient and you don't take it down, versus things that are worse and have to be taken down even after they are put up. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen ve'amen.